Welcome to Gleaning and Gathering. I'm your host, Eric Heinlich, and today I am contemplating a few more thoughts. There are a few lessons today that I'd like to share with you from my week this past week in life and learning. One of those things is be a student and not a critic. A great line this past week that I came across was, "We must pay attention to the frontiers of our ignorance." And I think there's probably more to know today than ever before, but there is more that we don't know. And being aware that I don't know and being willing to approach life as a student and not a critic. I think this is particularly challenging for people who are in the season of life that I am in right now. I think that it was Andy Stanley that said the next generation of office products rarely comes from the previous generation. Learning to listen to the next generation is a challenge. They're not as old as I am, and so therefore I don't think they have as much wisdom as I have. And yet there are life experiences that they have that I need to learn from. As a leader, we have to move into the future. And we can't straddle the divide between the past and the future. When we actually begin to move in a direction, we have to move forward. I think that it's really important to listen to the next generation. Another thing that I learned this past week was don't avoid the contrarians in your life. They're the ones who punch holes in complacency. And if we lead an innovative organization, it's going to start with you and your response to ideas. And so if there are people who are saying, that's not going to work and here's the reasons why, rather than just dismissing them, we need to recognize that they are bringing important information to our attention. The ability to monitor and to learn from voices that are disparate, that are not what I'm wanting to hear, is a challenge, I think, for every leader, but making sure that we are not dismissing or avoiding the contrarians in our life. Another study that I came across was that a key predictor of success among leaders is self-awareness. The number one characteristic of successful leaders is their ability to be self-aware. How are you responding to the ideas that are coming to you? Self-awareness really is the ability to monitor and regulate self-behavior, watching how it affects other people, paying attention to ourselves and how it is affecting the people that are around us. It's a little bit like a fish. It doesn't know it's wet, and we may not know the way that we come across to other people, but having self-awareness is a huge, huge asset for a leader. Another set of ideas that I came across this past week that were influential to me come from Andrew Abella. There was a podcast entitled The Habits That Change Everything, and that was on the Double Win podcast by Michael Hyatt and Megan Hyatt Miller. By the way, if you're not listening to that podcast, you absolutely should. They interview a lot of amazing leaders, and it's great content. But in that episode, he was talking about virtues are specific habits of excellence. And he's done some amazing research on this in his book, and the historical context that he gives for how the idea of virtues being habits of excellence was developed, going back to Augustine and some of the Greek philosophers, and then working up through Thomas Aquinas. It's just fascinating to listen to. But one of the things that he said was that there are 4 cardinal virtues that all the other virtues really are sub-virtues of these. And so these are the ones that we really need to develop first. These 4 cardinal virtues are temperance, or self-discipline. It's the habit of only following your desires when it is rational and makes sense to do so. And so if you don't have self-discipline, if you don't have temperance, you're not going to be able to do anything else, because you're not going to be able to make yourself do anything else. The second cardinal discipline is that of courage, or the power of moving forward despite being afraid. If you have self-discipline, the next thing that you're going to need is courage to be able to actually move forward and to overcome those fears that you have. The third habit is that of justice, or the habit of treating others fairly. As we continue to act, we need to make sure that we have that virtue in our lives. And then the fourth cardinal virtue is that of prudence, or the power of making right decisions. So being able to discern, should I do this or should I do that? Those four cardinal virtues have several subcategories, and he goes into that further. Thomas Aquinas, in his treatise on the virtues, in his Summa Theologica, fleshes that out in more detail. Those each have sub-virtues, and he said there are 15 different types of self-discipline, or that are sub-disciplines of self-discipline. And so an example of one of those would be restraint. And he defines restraint as the power of saying no to small things. And so I may want a second cup of coffee, or I may want to have another piece of cake, but I restrain myself. I say no to that. And so if I get into the habit of saying no to myself on small things, it's much easier to do that on larger things. And then there's the subdiscipline of diligence. Again, it's another subdiscipline of temperance. The real way to grow in diligence, he points out, is to fall in love with your subject. When you really love something and you want to know about it, then you are going to dive into that deeper and work at it harder. The idea of emotions providing motion, that was a phrase that stuck out to me. Emotions provide motion, and we don't need to stifle those desires. We need to make sure that they are channeled in the right direction. And so it's not a matter of saying no to myself on everything and living some sort of ascetic lifestyle, but it's a matter of taking a desire and channeling that in the right direction. For instance, social media takes a desire to know in a direction that's not necessarily beneficial or helpful always. Just doom scrolling through on social media is not really the kind of learning that's going to make you a better person. But if you take that desire to know and you move it towards something of value, it can have a positive effect. So there's a desire there, and taking that emotion and letting that provide motion, we need to redirect our desires towards the right things. Some other things that I'm learning in life, I'm learning to put things in a box. I had an opportunity to speak, and I would have loved to have had another couple days to put together a better presentation and to do a better job and to practice and all those things. But I went with the presentation that I had. I did my best to deliver, and it worked out. And at the end of it, I was glad that I had put it in a box. There were other things that I needed to spend more time on than that. Learning to just give things a time, give a box to the project, to the presentation, and say, this is how much time that I'm going to allot to this. And then working from that basis, rather than stressing about and spending more time on something than what it really deserves. This past week, also, I've been coaching, and it's been exciting. I've got 10 clients right now in my coaching group, and group coaching provides them an opportunity to be able to come together once a week. We meet on Zoom. During that time, they can ask questions. There's an opportunity to get feedback on the work that they're doing. And really, it's about getting dialed in on a system that is going to help them to become more productive. And so we're using the Full Focus Planner, and it's a great tool, and helping them to be able to take every piece of that and week by week implement that in their life, developing new habits, developing new patterns. It's been so exciting to see the transformation that's taking place as they begin to get a hold of these concepts and then actually implement them in their lives. It's super gratifying to me. I am so thankful that I have the opportunity to be able to serve leaders in this way. my goal is to be able to deliver excellent content and superior customer service to them, and to do that in a way that hopefully will help them in life and leadership to be able to go the places that God wants them to go. So if it's something that would be helpful to you, I encourage you to go to heimlichfamilyconsulting.com. You can check that out. There's a couple different options right now. You can book a discovery call. We do have some upcoming workshops, and we're planning on sharing on a number of different topics. But the key area that we're sharing about is schedule optimization right now. How do I make the most of my time? How do I take my time and really work on the things that are most important to me, that will move me towards the goals in life that I have and that will make me more productive? I was just working with a client yesterday, and as he was working specifically on trying to develop content in his business that will drive revenue and will develop further opportunities, we were talking about the need for habit in regards to this. He's promised himself for years, I'm going to write these articles. These are the things that I'm going to get ready, and it's in my head, and I know what I want to do. But getting that down on paper, getting that to actually happen is another thing entirely. And so we talked about how do we create the rhythm that will make that happen. And it really comes back to habit. And with every habit, as James Clear reminds us, there's a cue, there's some sort of trigger that's going to prompt the action. There's a response to that. And so that response is what most people think of as the habit, but it's actually a response to a trigger that causes us to say, okay, we need to do this next thing. And then that leads to a reward. And so we don't do things that we don't want to do. And so having a reward is super important if we're going to actually create a habit. And then that should lead to repetition. I'm working on week 30 right now of going to the gym 5 days each week. Every day, right about 5:30, I'm pulling into the gym, and it has an effect over time. It is something that is shaping me. It's something that's helping in a variety of different ways to be able to have that discipline in my life. But creating that regular rhythm didn't just happen. And I've had some other streaks in the past. I think I've gotten up to 29 weeks before in a row before breaking my streak. But now I'm all the way to 30, and I'm going to keep going. But having that repetition to where now it feels strange on days that I don't go to the gym. It's like something's missing here. And so having that repetition is really what we're wanting to try to develop. Doing it in such a way that we have created a habit. It's something that we're going to do and do on a repeated basis. Creating habits is important, but creating the right habits is even more important. And so I want to encourage you, if you have not been working on the Cardinal Virtues in your life, I want to encourage you to begin to develop habits in those 4 areas. In the areas of self-discipline, courage, justice, and prudence. And maybe you just need to start with self-discipline. I don't know if you're like me, but that's where the game is won or lost. Because if I can't make myself do something, then all the rest is in vain. But maybe you're in a place that you need to develop courage. I remember when I first started this podcast, there was just this incredible fear of releasing anything, putting it out there. What are people going to say? Are people going to make fun of it? Are they going to think it's stupid? Are they not going to like it? And recognizing that whether they do or whether they don't, the courage to move forward and implement this podcast has led to many people being influenced. Things that wouldn't have been accomplished being accomplished. That discipline of courage for me was one that I've had to face a lot in coaching. I've been a pastor for years and worked with people really in a coaching kind of relationship. But when you're going to put yourself out there as a coach and say, are you willing to actually pay for this? That's a different thing. And it requires some courage. There's some fear involved in, is anybody going to actually want me to be their coach? But recognizing that courage can lead to some incredibly good things. And then just developing that habit or that virtue of justice, the habit of treating others fairly and well, and making sure that I'm looking out for and attending to the needs of the others that are around me. And then prudence, developing that power of making right choices, that power of discerning between what is better and what is best. Just some things that I'm chewing on this week, and I wanted to take time to share that with you. For Gleaning and Gathering, God bless.